Andrea to focus also on a case example that we have from the EUnetHTA time and also the challenges. Andrea?
Yes, thank you. It's very difficult to now tell something new compared to what has been already said during the morning, and with Adrian being so very much enthusiastic about these voices. But first of all, I'm a consultant. We do provide services and consultancies, so maybe it's a peculiar way to look at things, maybe a little bit more looking at the one side and the other side. So we'll see what comes up with. I think I had structured the presentation into 3 buckets, which was introduction to new HTA regulation, which I will mostly speak because it's been extensively covered area. But I would like to also focus on what I think are the top 3 access challenges that medical devices are facing. And then I would like to go a little bit more deep diving into one case study of a EUnetHTA exercise that was done for a therapeutic class, specifically for diabetes, continuous glucose monitoring. In terms of introduction of the new HTA regulation, I would just like to do one consideration, if I may, if I'm allowed to, which is not on this slide, but on the next one, if you can move forward. Which is really a reflection point. I don't want to go to explain this regulation to experts that are in the room, but it's mainly a consideration about timing, because if the JCA will start at the CE mark attribution, that will probably add up to 100 days. We don't know how much exactly, but the risk would be we got 12 to 18 months timing, which Andrea showed before, to go through the process, adding potentially another 100 days minimum to go through the full JCA process. So it's a bit of reflection regarding how can this process be speed up, because if we can go to the next slide, Jörg, and the next one, please. What I would like to discuss is really the 3 main challenges that I see on top of the table, which are for me can also be linked to the KPIs that were discussed earlier. Number 1 is time to access for patients. Number 2 is equity of access, because it's all about patients, everybody said, right? But equity of access represent also an issue at European level, but in heavily regionalized countries also at national level. And then the third one is regarding sustainability. I've heard a lot of comments regarding the clinical evidence that is very much important for patients to feel safe about the procedure they're going through, right? But it's also very much linked to the sustainability short, medium, long term of the healthcare system. So I also wanted to put that into perspective because I think they're all interrelated. So time to access, the first, if we can go to the next slide, is I think that the CE mark represents the launch, in fact, of any health technology, basically. However, I heard Monder before asking about why do we need to be so certain before we actually launch a new medical technology and we can accumulate data once the product is actually available into the market. And to accumulate data, you can do that through real-world evidence. You can do that through adaptive trial design, for example, that might demonstrate benefits into different population, different settings, and so forth. And I'm thinking about the PICOs in particular, because we will see the device that we'll be talking about. It started with certain scope and goals, but it might well go to a wider population. And at the end of the day, I think market access comes much later, in fact, because the real market access needs to get more and more data available that are produced in real world, in fact. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. The second point is regarding access pathways, whether there are any early access pathways that could be utilized at national level, because we heard about JCA being very strict. I got the data, I launch it, and then we will see. But in fact, there are some alternatives that could be also potentially utilized in UK, France, Germany, and I think everybody is aware of Pecan, for example, Digas and UB in Germany, Pecan Impact in France, but also exceptional use and IDAP. There is a very new process in UK, which is called Innovative Device Access Pathway, which is piloting a few technologies to see if they can access the market earlier and then confirm the actual results later on. And also, one reflection point is really consider a centralized, accelerated access procedure, which would be facilitating access from a European and a national perspective, with clear set of principles, eligibility criteria, managing expectations vis-a-vis what is the final outcome and patient-relevant outcomes that we are going to mention. I think this is kind of set up the scene about time to access. In the next slide, I also wanted to talk about equity of access. I think there are a few considerations that might be also put into perspective. There might be very much different approaches, for example, for digital medical devices, and I'm extending the considerations a little bit more. And they have very different approaches, as you can see. And maybe there is also an opportunity here to think about cross-border collaboration moving forward also for digital devices and beyond just the medical devices, because truth is, I heard a lot of times saying Parma is different from MedTech, from digital health solutions, but there might be very much a lot of cases coming up where everything will be combined. So then how do you regulate all this complexity? It's a big question mark. And on the other side, it's really about equity in terms of adaptability for all patients across the globe, of course, affordability for all patient populations. It's very much different to talk about Europe, US, or Africa when you talk about the devices. And I'm not going into the details, but I think it's pretty much understandable. And then it's about making sure that we don't have populations that are underserved across the globe, because it's really about equity at the end of the day for patients. So maybe couple of ideas, and I wanted to show one example, which I will take back in my final example, which is really looking at just Italy. This is the case of a continuous glucose monitoring system. This is a picture of December 2018, and you can see how different it is access for patients across Italy, just Italy. And then you will see Europe. The yellow ones basically says that diabetes type 1 and 2 with multi-daily insulin injections can access the product. The green ones, basically, they are saying every multi-daily injections can have access. And the blue one is type 1 and type 1 and type 2, so there's a typo there, with additional conditions. So if I'm living, for example, in Lombardy, I will have access more easily than if I'm living in Puglia, to give you a strict example. In the end, there was a more complex situation where you got different regions with different ways of distributing the product, which adds complexity to the system, direct distribution with a distribution on behalf. If we can go more forward in terms of sustainability, that's where I wanted to link the evidence with the performance and the financial constraints that every national system has, basically. On the left side, you have some early access program fast tracks that have been utilized across different countries. I'm not going into the details, but I wanted to really look at the cost side. Basically, there are a plethora of alternatives out there that goes into performance-based risk-sharing agreements, so I can accelerate access much earlier on, as we can do for pharmaceuticals, in fact. And it goes through managed utilization in real world, for example, performance linked to reimbursement, and then you can look at outcomes guarantees, money-back guarantees, conditional treatment, and so forth. And you can also link it to clinical endpoints that are much more meaningful for certain patients. And on the other side, it's really about generating evidence that can be bringing up more and more information about how good the medical device is or not. And we also have examples in Tuscany, for example, of alternative reimbursement that could accelerate access of products within the region. If we go to the next one, I also wanted to say that I think this is coming from MedTech Europe, in fact. There are quite a lot of innovative payment schemes that can be utilized to accelerate access of products within European countries. And if you go to the next one, I just wanted to say, if you want to download there with the QR code, you might get a little bit more details about what are the innovative access pathways that you would like to see more details across Europe. Next slide, please. The case study. I wanted to be very practical here, but I will skip a bit, but just a little bit of context. Diabetes type 1, type 2, and gestational are the key types of diabetes patients that need to go through insulin injection. If you can go to the next slide very quickly. This is the setting where there is an ecosystem around. That's why I was talking about pharmaceutical plus digital health plus medical device. They're all interconnected when you talk about diabetes patients. And I think this is a clear example where everything can come together, and the value of 1 + 1 + 1 might be just more than 3, for example, also in terms of value, pricing, and impact for patients in terms of outcomes. The next slide, please. This is the whole scenarios, and I'm going to focus on the left side where you see Dexcom, Abbott, Medtronic, Roche, Ascensia. There are more now, there are more coming, etc. But it's really about the blood glucose monitoring systems. The EUnetHTA exercise that was done back in 2017-18 is looking at that class of devices. It would not be in scope, by the way, by the JCA, because it's a 2B type devices, but I think there was a collaborative work that was done through the different national systems that brought a very interesting case and results, as you will see, in terms of evaluation. So if you can go to the next slide, next slide, I think we can go to the results, basically. So this is how the EUnetHTA exercise was set up at the time. So as you can see, we're looking at diabetics, we're looking at a very specific PICO framework. So the focus is on the PICO. You see patients type 1, 2, or gestational diabetes, real-time and flash glucose monitoring, self-monitoring glucose, head-to-head comparison between real-time and FGM, and then certain specific domains in terms of effects for the outcomes for patients. In particular, they looked at the effectiveness and HbA1c outcomes and so forth. The PNR status of the CGM at the time was the price between 1,000 and 3,000. I'm putting up there because I think there is a strong link between outcomes and the price. And then they looked at the 12 RCTs that were available at the time. They look at one-to-one head results, and they look at any other data that would be supporting evidence for outcomes, like time in range, time in hypoglycemia events, and so forth. If you can go to the next slide, please. This is the outcome. Yeah, this is the outcome. I'm almost done. What I wanted to say is, looking at time to access, you see a lot of differences at European level, at global level. The CE mark happened in September 2014, and as you can see, the ones that are coming up earlier are between 2016, 2017. So time to access is a problem because patients were getting the availability of these products much later, in particular this product. In terms of equity of access, you can see that there are a lot of differences in terms of coverage, as we already seen from Frederic earlier on. So the way it is funded, it's very different, but also the population that were funded were very much different. There was also an analysis in terms of risk of biases. All the red dots, the yellow dots, are basically looking at the different trials, and if they were not green, the results were basically felt to be biased, which means there was not a conclusive outcome of the assessment saying this is definitely valid in terms of outcomes. And in fact, even though they said there are greater clinical effectiveness for real-time CGM, for sure, they said the evidence quality was limited. And this was one of the limiting factors, as we were discussing, even though there was then a very wide acceptance in the markets and by patients because they saw there was a lot of clear outcomes available. And I think very interesting patient-reported outcomes and safety support use was very much valued in terms of the assessment from the EUnetHTA standpoint of view. If you can go to the next one, this is you just saw that, but just wanted to highlight how different the results were from a regional level. And then if you can go to the next one, I'm done. I think we can skip this one. Wrapping up, I wanted to just suggest that there are time to access, equity of access, and sustainability, I think, are the three main drivers that could be considered in terms of potential evaluations in principle. I'm done. Thank you so much. I've been probably too long. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andrea. And I think it's a great example to see over time how the evidence generation actually gets to a point where there is then in this case, a voluntary cooperation leading to multiple suppliers of the technology, and so I think it's really when we take the starting point of just after the CE mark and then moving on evidence generation. And what I heard was to find schemes, find access pathways, find continuous evidence generations for the purpose of the medical device regulations, or for the CE mark, for the conformity assessment, but then also, of course, for the health technology assessment.